Welcome to Cozy Love Stories, your home for wholesome, dreamy romances to help you relax and unwind. In today's story, we follow Claire Matthews, who has her life perfectly organized, from color-coded schedules to detailed to-do lists. But when her heart starts to follow a path she didn't plan for, Claire must decide if she's ready to step off the well-marked trail and take a chance on love. So settle in, let the world slow down, and enjoy today's story, The Scenic Route. Chapter 1. Claire Matthews had her life down to a science, or at least a well-structured, color-coded chart. Monday through Friday ran like the smooth hum of an engine. Coffee at 7:15, inbox triage at 8, team stand-up at 8:30. Today, however, was different. Dinner with Mary wasn't part of the original plan for her day. She'd penciled in laundry and meal prep. But her sister had texted, insisting they meet. One spontaneous dinner wasn't the end of the world, Mary claimed, and Claire had reluctantly agreed to go. She closed her laptop at 6:03 p.m., tugged on her tailored trench coat, and glanced at her reflection in the darkened office window. Polished, professional, predictable, she sighed, then walked out into the drizzly Portland evening. Mary's chosen restaurant was a cozy little bistro in the Pearl District, all flickering candles and the faint smell of rosemary bread. Claire found her sister already at a corner table, hair in a messy bun that somehow looked chic rather than accidental. Mary was everything Claire wasn't, warm chaos wrapped in an easy smile. Married, mom to a bright 7-year-old, the kind of person who could wing life and still land on her feet. "You're late," Mary teased as Claire slid into the booth. 2 minutes, Claire countered, smoothing her napkin. "And technically, fashionably late is your thing, not mine." Mary grinned, reaching for her glass of red. "Touché. So, how's life in color-coded land?" Claire rolled her eyes, though the jab was affectionate. "Efficient, predictable, the dream," Claire said. "Mm-hmm. You ever wonder you're so busy planning life, you might actually forget to live it?" Mary's tone held that infuriating mix of humor and concern. Claire blinked, the words landing like a tiny stone in still water, sending ripples outward. She tried for humor herself. "Excuse me?" she said. Mary leaned in, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "I'm serious. You skipped Sophie's school concert last month because you had work deadlines. You haven't been on a date in how long?" Claire stabbed at her salad. "I'm just busy. And I like my life. There's nothing wrong with being a hard worker," she said. "There's nothing wrong with it," Mary agreed, eyes softening. "But there's a difference between being a hard worker who likes her routine and being petrified of surprises," she said. Claire opened her mouth, ready to protest, but the truth in Mary's words pricked like a burr under her skin. She did hate surprises. Always had. Growing up, predictability was her safety net, especially with a sister like Mary who floated through life with wild ideas and zero consequences. Someone had to hold the line. That someone was always Claire. Dinner ended on light chatter, but Mary's comment stuck like a post-it note in Claire's mind. "You're so busy planning life, you might actually forget to live it." Later, curled on her couch with a chamomile tea and her favorite productivity app open on her phone, Claire scrolled through her weekend to-dos. Laundry, groceries, project proposal edits. Efficient, predictable, and if she was brutally honest, empty. She opened Instagram for a distraction. An ad popped up. Guided hiking group, 7 weeks of adventure. Explore the gorge every Saturday. Limited spots available. Claire snorted. Adventure wasn't exactly her brand. She scrolled past, then scrolled back. The ad showed laughing people on a sunlit trail, autumn leaves blazing like a fire around them. Her thumb hovered. A free trial hike was available, but the package for all 7 hikes was non-refundable. Impulse was not in Claire Matthews' vocabulary, but Mary's voice echoed in her mind like a dare. Before she could talk herself out of it, Claire tapped purchase. 7 Saturdays, no refunds, no free trial hike first. Her stomach flipped like she'd just jumped off a cliff. She set her phone down, staring at the confirmation email glowing on the screen. For the first time in a long time, her weekend plans weren't highlighted in predictable pastels. They were wild, messy, uncharted, and it terrified her. Chapter 2. Saturday dawned gray and damp, the kind of Pacific Northwest morning that made most people reach for an extra blanket and a second cup of coffee. Claire, however, was already lacing up brand new hiking boots in her spotless apartment. She'd researched the best-rated trail shoes, the most ergonomic trekking poles, and even the ideal moisture-wicking socks. Her gear was so coordinated, it could have starred in an outdoor catalog. She checked her watch. 7:45 a.m. Check-in was at 8:30. The drive from her home in the Buckman neighborhood on the east side of Portland would take 30 minutes on a Saturday morning free of traffic. She'd allowed for 45 minutes. The gorge greeted her with mist curling off the river, evergreens looming like dark sentinels. Claire pulled into the gravel lot at the entrance of the trail and took a deep breath. Damp earth and pine, nature, unpredictable, unscheduled. This was fine. Totally fine. Given her early arrival, she didn't spot a group right away. Only one man near the trailhead, adjusting the strap of a worn windbreaker while checking something on his phone. Broad shoulders, dark curls pulled back in a low knot, a beard framing a face both rugged and warm, the kind that belonged out here among the trees rather than behind a desk. For a flicker of a second, her stomach did a traitorous flip. Then he opened his mouth, and the flip evaporated under a wave of mild irritation. "Love the pro gear. I'm Ravi Shah, ready to conquer the wilderness," he called, voice warm but much too loud for this hour. "Absolutely. I did extensive preparation," she said crisply, adjusting the strap on her own pack. "Course you did. You'll put the rest of us slackers to shame." There was a playful tease in his tone, but not unkind. Before Claire could decide whether to be flattered or offended, a car door slammed, and chatter filled the lot as 2 others arrived. By 8:30, the entire group had gathered. Jake, a chatty guy in his mid-20s with a camera slung around his neck. Rosa, practical and friendly in her 30s, with a bright windbreaker and a quick smile. And Dan and Marissa, a couple in their 40s who seemed quietly content to stick close to each other. The introductions buzzed around Claire like bees, and she tried to match names to faces as efficiently as possible. Ravi clapped his hands with infectious enthusiasm. "All right, folks, hope you're ready to walk the walk because the talk is over," he quipped as the group started to fall into step behind him. The trail was initially gentler than Claire expected, winding beneath moss-draped trees with occasional glimpses of the river far below. But quiet? Forget it. Ravi narrated like a park ranger on espresso. Stories about local history, tips on spotting eagles, warnings about tricky trails in the gorge, and jokes that had the rest of the group chuckling. Claire forced a smile, though her inner monologue was less than charitable. Is this a hike or a podcast with audience participation? She thought to herself. Then the trail pitched upward, roots jutting like booby traps, and the easy rhythm vanished. Within minutes, Claire's breath sawed in and out, her calves burning as if on fire. She clutched her trekking poles and silently cursed every step. Okay, she admitted grimly to herself. Maybe I really do need to get out more. Meanwhile, Ravi floated ahead like gravity didn't apply to him, still talking, still grinning, barely a bead of sweat on his brow. If possible, his relentless cheerfulness made the climb worse, like being out-happied by a golden retriever in hiking boots. 2 miles in, Ravi slowed to walk beside her. You doing okay? He asked. I'm fine, Claire said. Why? You've got the look of someone mentally calculating their step count and their grocery list at the same time. His eyes twinkled. Relax. This isn't a race. Claire opened her mouth, ready with a retort, but then, annoyingly, she laughed. Just a little. And that might have been the most unsettling part of all. By the time they reached the overlook, the group was snapping photos and sharing snacks Ravi had packed. Claire accepted a granola bar mostly to avoid standing there empty-handed. She caught herself staring at the way sunlight threaded through Ravi's dark hair, then scolded herself silently. No, Claire, absolutely not. The descent back down the same trail came as a relief to Claire's tired legs. Conversation flowed easily among the others, with Jake animatedly describing his latest photo and Rosa chiming in with local restaurant tips. Dan and Marissa, for their part, traded good-natured jokes about who slipped the most on the hike. Claire, meanwhile, kept her answers short, listening more than speaking, the laughter weaving around her like a language she didn't quite know how to join. As she trudged down the final switchback, a familiar ache stirred, a throwback to cafeteria tables and playground edges where she'd always been the odd one out, orbiting just beyond the circle of easy camaraderie. When the hike ended, Ravi called out, Quick selfie to commemorate the adventure? A chorus of agreement rose from the group. Claire froze. A selfie? With strangers? When she was a sweaty mess? But she had no choice. The whole party was grouping together. Claire scooted next to Rosa and pasted on a polite smile. You all look like pros, Ravi called out, first snapping a photo of the group, then hopping next to Claire. He leaned towards her, arm extended to get everyone in the photo. Snuggle up, buttercups, Rosa giggled, while Claire's rigid cheeks ached from the effort to keep the smile plastered to her face. Following the photos, everyone chatted like old friends, exchanging numbers for a post-hike coffee. Everyone except Claire. She mumbled something about having plans and slid into her car, watching in her rearview mirror as Ravi laughed with the others, easy and unbothered. 6 more weeks of this? The thought made her stomach dip. Thrilled wasn't the word, not even close. But she wasn't the type to waste money, and she'd signed up for the whole 7-week package. Like it or not, she'd just have to grit her teeth and power through. Chapter 3. Sunday afternoons were supposed to be Claire's sanctuary. Her second cup of coffee drank slowly, laundry cycling in the background, the gentle order of a to-do list being conquered line by line. This Sunday, however, found her sore from yesterday's hike and still emotionally bruised from getting herself into this mess. Why hadn't she just taken the free trail hike? Then she wouldn't be on the hook for another 6 weeks of Ravi's relentless cheer and her own discomfort at being the least outdoorsy person in the group. Claire's wallowing was interrupted when her phone buzzed with a text from Mary. Sprained ankle. Can't take Sophie to the orchard. Please help. Mark's out of town. Claire stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She'd scheduled today for errands and meal prep, not corralling a 7-year-old through rows of apple trees. Still, Mary rarely asked for favors, and Claire did love spending time with her niece Sophie. With a resigned sigh, Claire typed back, "On my way." The orchard smelled like cider and damp leaves, laughter drifting from families weaving between trees heavy with fruit. Sophie dashed ahead, pink jacket flashing, while Claire trailed behind, clutching a basket, mentally recalculating her week. "Whoa there, Speedy," a warm voice called from somewhere to Sophie's left. Claire's head jerked toward the sound, and her stomach sank. Standing beneath a gnarled branch, one hand steadying a ladder, was Ravi Shah. Of course he'd be here. Claire forced her feet forward. "Hi," she said, voice pitched carefully neutral. "Hey, Claire," Ravi greeted warmly, as if they were old chums rather than awkward hiking acquaintances. Sophie's eyes ping-ponged between them. "Aunt Claire? You know this guy?" Ravi grinned. "Yeah, your Aunt Claire and I are friends. We just went hiking yesterday," he said. Sophie nodded solemnly, then broke into a mischievous grin. "Good, because I can't reach the big apples and Aunt Claire says she's too sore to help me," she said. "Well, that's a problem we can fix," Ravi said, grinning. He crouched so his eyes were level with Sophie's. "Want a boost, or should I climb up the ladder and play apple delivery guy?" "Boost!" Sophie giggled, and before Claire could intervene, Ravi had her perched on his shoulders, her delighted squeals ringing through the crisp air. He looked annoyingly at home in the orchard, sleeves rolled up, hair tousled by the breeze. Claire hovered, heart in her throat, torn between telling him to put her niece down before she fell and admitting the scene was disgustingly charming. Sophie stretched, plucked a shiny red apple, and held it aloft like a trophy. "There we go," Ravi said, setting her down gently. "You're a natural, kid." Soon enough, Sophie's apple basket was full. "Looks like you either need another basket or I'd say you've met your quota," he teased. Spotting another group eyeing the ladder, Ravi lifted a hand in apology. "Duty calls. My buddy asked me to help out today, so I can't spend all my time hanging out with you two, even if you are good company." With a wink, he turned back to help the other family. Sophie, oblivious, tugged on Claire's sleeve. "Can we stay longer, please?" she asked. Claire hesitated, then nodded. They made their way to a rustic stand where Claire bought 2 sweating cups of cold apple cider. Sophie sipped happily, foam on her upper lip, and declared it the best thing ever. After finishing, they wandered through the rest of the farm, past a tiny gift shop with homemade jam and jars of honey and a pen where goats vied for attention. Sophie laughed, pressing her fingers to the fence, before something else caught her eye, a play area stacked with hay bales and a few wooden structures for kids to climb. "Please, Aunt Claire," Sophie pleaded, eyes wide. Claire relented with a laugh. finding a spot near the edge of the play area. She'd barely settled when a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Guess we can't escape each other this weekend," Ravi said. He nodded toward Sophie scrambling up the hay. "She's got more energy than half the hiking group combined." "Tell me about it," Claire said, keeping her tone light, even as her pulse ticked faster. Ravi gave her an easy smile. His gaze held hers for a beat. "Well, I should get back to ladder duty, but it was really nice seeing you again today, Claire. Looking forward to our hike next week." And just like that, he was gone again, leaving Claire staring after him, cider-sweet air thick in her lungs. On the drive home, Sophie chattered about Ravi the apple hero. Claire kept her eyes on the road, ignoring the flutter in her chest, and the man with the easy grin and maddening ability to show up everywhere she didn't plan for. This was fine. Totally fine. So why did it feel like the universe was playing matchmaker behind her back? Chapter 4. Rain hammered Portland all week, and the next trail on the group's 7-week schedule bore the scars. The parking lot was a patchwork of puddles, and the earthy scent of wet pine clung to the cool air. Claire sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the muck beyond her windshield. She could turn back. She could claim food poisoning. But no, she wasn't a quitter, and she wasn't wasting good money. She stepped out carefully, boots sinking slightly into the gravel, and spotted the group clustered near the trailhead. She'd purposefully timed her drive to arrive just before 8:30 and avoid any unnecessary alone time with her loud hiking guide. Ravi was at the center of the gathered group, bright and buoyant as ever, like the rain clouds hadn't dared touch him. Of course. "Mornin', Captain Prepared," he called, grinning when she approached. "Glad you made it. We've got a real adventure today." Claire managed a smile that felt like it had been ironed onto her face. "Looks great," she said. "Don't worry," Ravi added cheerfully. "Mud builds character." The hike started easy enough. Soft ground, a few puddles, then the incline came, and with it, the sludge. Every step felt like a wrestling match with the earth. Claire's pristine boots were soon splattered, her carefully chosen leggings streaked with brown mud. Ravi, naturally, bounded ahead like a mountain goat, calling out tips and cracking jokes that had the group laughing. Claire kept her eyes on the trail, jaw tight, pretending her lungs weren't staging a quiet rebellion once again. Halfway up, her boot sole betrayed her. One slick root, one bad step, and Claire's foot shot sideways. Her arms windmilled, she pitched forward, knees hitting the muddy ground as her body lurched toward a full sprawl. She would have face-planted if not for the strong hand that closed firmly around her elbow. "You okay?" Ravi's voice was warm, steady, and far too close. He helped her to her feet. Claire nodded, breathless. "Fine. Totally fine." His eyes sparkled with mischief. "Good, because I'd hate to lose my most organized hiker." Heat flared in her cheeks as he guided her back to solid ground. She muttered her thanks, wishing the earth would swallow her, preferably without the mud. By the time they reached the summit, Claire was exhausted and plastered with grime. The others cheered, snapping photos of the mist-draped view. Ravi produced, of course, extra snacks, passing them around like a hero distributing rations. Claire accepted the proffered protein bar, mostly to keep from collapsing. The hike down was easier once again, gravity doing its part, But the humiliation from her fall lingered. No one else was even half as dirty. They all seemed to glide along, laughing like old friends, while she trudged in silence, the odd one out yet again. At the trailhead, Ravi clapped his hands. Group selfie time. A chorus of cheers rose. Claire had to bite back a groan. A selfie again, this time with her looking like she'd rolled in a pig pen. But Ravi was already herding the group together to fit into frame. He once again positioned himself at her side, the brushing of his arm against hers, sending a surprising shockwave of heat straight down into Claire's bones. Oblivious, Ravi grinned into the lens. Then he straightened and turned towards everyone again. Okay, crew, how about we get out of all this liquid sunshine and celebrate conquering this mudfest with coffee? There's a great spot on the way back to Portland. The group responded with an enthusiastic chorus of yeses and laughter. Everyone except Claire. She forced a polite smile and said she had other plans. The truth? Pride and mortification. She wasn't about to sip cappuccinos while looking like she'd wrestled a swamp monster. As she pulled out of the lot, she caught a glimpse of them in her rear view mirror once again. Ravi laughing at something Jake said, Rosa beaming up at him. The group was clustered in easy camaraderie. A sharp, unexpected pang settled in her chest. For one absurd moment, she wished she'd stayed. Driving home with mud drying on her leggings, Claire gripped the wheel and exhaled. Why did his smile keep replaying in her mind like a looped video? Claire shook her head hard, as if the motion could fling the thought away. 5 more weeks. 5 more Saturdays of Ravi Shah and his golden retriever energy. She wasn't sure whether to cry or laugh. One thing was certain. She needed a very long shower. Chapter 5. By Monday morning, Claire had convinced herself the hike was a closed chapter in her week. Work deadlines loomed, laundry awaited folding, and she had exactly 0 mental bandwidth for golden retriever men and muddy humiliation. She checked her hair in the hallway mirror and headed out for her ritual caffeine stop at a sleek little cafe 2 blocks from her office that specialized in perfectly frothed almond milk lattes. The line was mercifully short. Claire scanned the pastry case, debating whether she'd earned a croissant, when a voice behind her said, bright as sunrise, "Well, if it isn't Captain Prepared." Her stomach did a graceless drop. Slowly, like someone bracing for impact, she turned, and there he was, Ravi Shah, in jeans and a soft gray Henley that managed to look both casual and unfairly flattering. His hair was down, curling around his jaw, and he wore that same maddeningly effortless grin. "Morning? What are you doing here?" she said, tone clipped in the way she reserved for overly chatty neighbors and pushy sales reps. "Getting coffee," he replied, eyes dancing. "Unless this is one of those exclusive reservation-only cafes you've got locked in your planner," he added. Claire opened her mouth and shut it. "Very funny," she said finally, aiming for light but landing somewhere in polite. Ravi grinned. "You come here often?" "It's on my way to work," she said, shrugging. "Plus they get my almond milk latte right every time, and that's a rarity," she added. "Ah, a woman of principle," he teased, "and of good taste." Claire let out a short laugh before she could stop herself, then busied her hands with straightening the strap of her bag. "Do you always charm your way through the city before 8 a.m.? she asked. "Only when I run into people I actually like." The words were easy, tossed out like a casual truth, and somehow that was worse. Claire turned back to the chalkboard, focusing on the menu as if her life depended on it. When the barista called her name, she grabbed her latte like it was a life raft. "Well, have a good day," she said, already pivoting toward the door. "See you Saturday," Ravi called out after her, entirely too cheerful for 7:45 a.m. Claire muttered something that sounded like, "looking forward to it," but might have been a low growl. Wednesday's lunch hour was supposed to be simple. Pop into the farmer's market at Shemansky Park, grab fresh produce, and get back to work before her next meeting. Instead, as she compared heirloom tomatoes, that now familiar voice floated over the hum of shoppers. "Either it's my lucky day or you're stalking me, Claire." Her head snapped up to find Ravi, all relaxed posture and sunshine grin. Claire sputtered, her brain stalling out completely. What? No," she managed, cheeks heating. She was stuck. Her little basket was brimming with produce from this very stand. There was no graceful way to put everything back and flee without looking like she'd staged an escape plan. Ravi seemed oblivious to her inner panic. "Great day for the market, huh?" he asked, shifting the empty crate at his feet. "Any good dinner plans with all that?" Claire's brain scrambled for a coherent answer. "Just, salads," she offered, feeling ridiculous the second the words left her mouth. Why couldn't she speak like a normal human being around him? She was a seasoned professional, for Pete's sake, not a teenager fumbling through small talk. He smiled, warm and easy, and for some reason that made her want to run more. The vendor called out, "Hey, Ravi, got that crate of pears ready for you." Ravi shot him a thumbs up, then looked back at her. "Pears?" she blurted, because apparently her mouth had no filter. "For work," he said easily, like that explained everything. Before she could point out that an entire crate of pears seemed excessive for their small hiking group's snack, the vendor returned with a load. Ravi hoisted it without effort, and Claire's eyes betrayed her, following the easy strength in his arms. "See you Saturday," he said over his shoulder, flashing a grin, before disappearing into the crowd. Claire stood frozen, clutching her basket, heart thumping like she'd run a marathon. "Stop noticing his arms, Claire." That night, she relayed the encounters to Mary over FaceTime, while her sister lounged on the couch, ankle propped up. "My hiking guide is everywhere," Claire groaned. "Coffee shop, farmer's market. What's next, my dentist appointment?" Mary grinned. "Sounds like fate to me," she said. "It sounds like Portland has a population of 500,000 people and I keep bumping into the same one." Claire shot back. Her sister's smile softened. "Maybe that's the universe telling you to loosen up. Not everything can go in a color-coded planner, sis," Mary said. Claire rolled her eyes. But later, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she wondered, just for a moment, what exactly the universe thought it was doing. Chapter 6. Friday night at Mary's house was its usual brand of cozy chaos. The faint smell of mac and cheese clung to the air as her niece Sophie hummed to herself while arranging crayons into a rainbow on the living room floor. Claire sat cross-legged on the couch, phone in hand, pretending to skim an article while actually reading the latest group message from Ravi. He'd sent a cheerful reminder about tomorrow's hike, complete with a few pictures from last week's mud-splattered adventure. Claire's mouth twitched, a small traitorous smile forming as she swiped through. There she was in one shot, standing stiffly off to the side, while everyone else grinned like a hiking ad, and there was Ravi, mud-streaked across one sleeve, his grin bright as ever. "Why are you smiling like that?" Mary's voice cut through her thoughts. Claire startled, fumbling to lock her screen. "Like what?" she said, aiming for innocence. "Like a teenager reading a text from her crush." Mary leaned over before Claire could angle the phone away, catching a flash of the photo. Her grin turned sly. Well, well, is that your hiking group? And more importantly, is that handsome man your hiking guide? Claire snorted. Please, you just think he looks good because he was the only one who wasn't drenched in sweat by the end of the hike, she said. I think he looks good because he's easy on the eyes. Mark, come here and give us your opinion. Is Claire's hiking guide a cutie patootie or not? Mary laughed. Claire's brother-in-law peeked over at the phone. Objectively handsome, he monotoned. See? Mary crowed triumphantly. Even if he were, which, whatever, it wouldn't matter, Claire said. He's clearly a guy living off part-time gigs and I'm a professional woman with a 401k. Mary laughed. Wow, that didn't sound snobby at all. I'm just being practical, Claire insisted. Maybe you're scared, Mary said softly. Scared of someone who doesn't fit your plan. Claire scoffed, reaching for her tea. That's ridiculous. But even as she said it, the words stuck in her thoughts like peanut butter. Just then, Sophie bounded over, clutching a crayon. What are you looking at, Aunt Claire? Before Claire could react, Sophie snagged the phone from the cushion. That's Ravi, Sophie announced triumphantly. Ravi, eh? Mary drawled, eyes sparkling with mischief. Would this happen to be the same Ravi you and Sophie met apple picking? She asked. Yep, Sophie chirped. He helped me get the big apples. Mary turned back to Claire, an impish grin on her face. Funny, you made it sound like he was some random guy at the orchard, not your objectively handsome hiking guide. Claire opened her mouth to protest, but Sophie barreled on, eyes wide with earnest curiosity. Aunt Claire, you think Ravi is handsome? Are you and him getting married? Claire choked so hard on her tea she had to grab a napkin, while Mary cackled like it was the best entertainment she'd had all week. Later that night, back in her apartment once again, Claire lined up her gear for the morning hike like a general preparing for battle. Boots cleaned, leggings laid out, water bottle filled to the brim. She smoothed the sleeve of her jacket and gave herself a firm nod in the mirror. This time, she muttered, it's going to go well. No mud fiascos and no more awkward stilted conversation. She squared her shoulders. I'm used to Ravi now. I can talk to him like a grown adult. Her reflection arched a brow, as if to say, really? Claire blew out a breath. I'm a professional woman, she reminded herself, with a 401k. Somehow that felt like a battle cry and a prayer all at once. Chapter 7. Saturday arrived crisp and golden. The gorge had dressed itself in its finest fall attire. Leaves blazed in shades of amber and crimson, scattering across the trail like confetti. Claire inhaled deeply as she stepped out of her car. This was going to be different. Just a pleasant hike and a little scenery to fill the day. The group gathered near the trailhead. Jake was already crouched to capture a perfect angle of a dew-kissed maple leaf, narrating to no one in particular about composition and natural light. Rosa waved warmly, while Dan and Marissa smiled at her as they adjusted their matching day packs. And then there was Ravi, grinning like the sun had taken human form. Claire, you made it, he said, voice carrying easily over the crunch of leaves. Theme of the day, fake it till you make it. Of course, she replied, forcing a positive outlook. Wouldn't miss it. He gave her outfit a once-over. Functional layers, boot already dusted from the parking lot, and nodded approvingly. Look at you, all trail ready. Captain prepared, strikes again, he said. Claire arched a brow. Says the guy who looks like he's filming a commercial for Adventure Shampoo, she said. Ravi blinked in mock offense before his grin widened. Wow, was that a clapback? progress. The others chuckled as they set off, and Claire felt a flicker of something dangerously close to pride. She hadn't frozen. Progress indeed. The trail wound through a corridor of gold and russet trees, and although she couldn't see it, Claire knew the Columbia River glinted like polished steel far below. Ravi talked about various viewpoints in the gorge, and occasionally tossed a fact about the area over his shoulder as they walked. The group paused often for photos, Jake corralling people into frame, with Rosa happily obliging. Claire hung back during the first few snaps, but eventually Ravi nudged her forward with a grin. "Come on, Claire. Future generations need proof you survived the Great Mud Saga." She rolled her eyes, but stepped into the photo, cheeks warming as the camera clicked. Halfway up, the teasing started again. Ravi commented on her water pack. "Fancy hydration tech, I'm impressed." And Claire shot back. "Some of us like not dying of dehydration. Thank you very much." Jake grinned over his shoulder. "You two argue like an old married couple." Heat surged to her cheeks like wildfire. Ravi just laughed, hands raised in mock surrender. "Whoa, easy there. We've only been married 3 hikes." The group erupted in laughter, and Claire forced a smile even as her stomach did a weird, uncomfortable flip. They continued upward, conversation weaving through the crisp air. Somewhere along the way, Ravi launched into a ridiculous story about leading a group that included a pet ferret in a backpack. The mental image, tiny head popping out like a furry jack-in-the-box, hit Claire so hard she let out an unguarded laugh instead of her usual polite chuckle. A real, belly-deep laugh that startled her as much as anyone else. Ravi glanced back, eyes lighting at the sound. "There it is," he said softly, almost to himself. Claire felt her face heat again, but this time was surprised to find she didn't mind as much. By the time they reached the summit, her legs ached pleasantly, and the view stole what breath she had left. A vast sweep of river and forest under a sky brushed with pale blue. The group fanned out to take photos, voices bright with awe. Claire lingered near the edge, gazing out over the expanse. Her heart still raced, but not entirely from the climb. Somewhere between the first teasing jab and that unguarded laugh, something had shifted. "He's not entirely awful," she admitted to herself reluctantly, then shook her head as if the thought could be dislodged like a stubborn leaf. Chapter 8. The following week, Claire's newfound courage was threatening to give way. Her phone buzzed early Saturday morning with a string of cancellations. Rosa was out of town for work, Jake had come down with the flu, and Dan and Marissa were attending a wedding. Claire stared at the screen, warring with herself. Half of her screamed to avoid an entire hike alone with Ravi and the complicated feelings he stirred in her. Claire's other half, stubborn and rule-bound, reminded her that she'd paid for 7 weeks and she wasn't about to back out now. And more than that, she just didn't want to give up. With a resigned sigh and a muttered pep talk about commitment, she grabbed her gear, locked the door, and headed for the gorge. By the time she parked in front of the trailhead, Claire had counted at least half a dozen excuses she could text to Ravi. Unexpected work, a headache, alien abduction, anything to avoid spending 2+ hours alone with the hiking guide who made her pulse pound like she'd missed a deadline. Her excuses failed her, and Claire soon found herself standing in the crisp morning air, tugging her jacket tighter as golden light spilled across the gorge. Ravi spotted her and lifted a hand in greeting, smile softer than usual. "Hey, Captain Prepared. Looks like it's just us today." Claire forced a shrug. "Guess so." Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. They started up the trail, the silence stretching at first, filled only by the crunch of leaves and the distant rush of water. Without the group's chatter, everything felt magnified. The hollow drum of her heartbeat, the whisper of wind through the pine. "So," Ravi said after a few minutes, voice easy, low. "Gotta admit, after the first week, I wasn't sure you'd come back." Claire snorted softly. "Honestly, neither was I," she said. His laugh rolled warm through the cool air. "I'm glad you did. But then I thought you might swear off trails for good after all that mud the second week," he said. "I'm still finding dirt in places it shouldn't be." She deadpanned, and his grin widened. "Last week was a good hike, though," she said, the words slipping out more easily than she expected. Ravi's answering smile was warm. "Yeah, I think so too." Conversation unfolded slowly but naturally, like the trail itself, winding, unhurried. Claire surprised herself, sharing more than she intended. It started small, how she'd always been the responsible one growing up, the kid who color-coded her homework while everyone else played outside, the one teachers leaned on to organize the group project or help pick up after a messy art assignment. She told him how that habit of holding things together came from necessity, not choice. Ravi glanced at her, curiosity soft in his eyes. "What do you mean?" Claire hesitated, then exhaled. "My parents were loving, but scattered. Turns out both of them have ADHD, which wasn't diagnosed until much later in life. When I was a kid, though, no one knew. Our house was kind of chaos most of the time, and if I didn't stay on top of things, permission slips didn't get signed, Christmas gifts went unwrapped, and birthdays almost got forgotten." She smiled faintly, the memory bittersweet. Someone had to keep the wheels from falling off. It was never going to be my sister Mary. She's amazing and I love her to death, but she's always been carefree about those details. So it fell to me. Every time. Ravi's expression gentled. "That sounds like a lot to put on a kid," he said. "It felt normal back then. Or I thought it was normal." She adjusted her strap as they walked. Dad got diagnosed in his 40s, then Mom a year later. They learned a ton and put systems in place. Life got a lot easier for them. But by then, Claire gave a tiny shrug. I was already cemented in my ways. Being the responsible one wasn't just what I did, it was who I was. Claire paused before adding the harder truth. "I know I'm rigid, and I know that it pushes people away." "You're not rigid. You're structured," Ravi said, with an encouraging smile. Claire gave a humorless laugh. "Tell that to my last boyfriend." Ravi's brows lifted slightly, but he stayed quiet as she continued, words halting at first as she explained the breakup. "It wasn't dramatic," she said, voice soft as falling leaves. "He told me I was too much and not enough all at once." Her mouth twisted in a bitter smile. "And the worst part, I tried so hard to be easy, to be fun." Her gaze dropped to the trail, boots scuffing at the dirt. Ravi's expression softened. "Sounds like he didn't deserve you," he said. "Or maybe I didn't deserve him. I was too rigid and not spontaneous enough to keep life interesting," she murmured, hating how small she felt. "Don't do that," Ravi said gently. "You're organized, focused. Those are strengths, Claire. I admire that." His voice carried a quiet conviction that made her chest tighten. She didn't know what to do with words like that. Then, lighter, teasing, Ravi added, "A rigid person wouldn't keep showing up for hikes this hard, and definitely not for a solo trek with a guy who won't shut up." That earned Ravi a chuckle from Claire, making his grin widen. After a beat, he looked ahead, voice quieter. "I know what it's like to feel like a disappointment, too." She glanced at him, brows knitting, and he told her, "Grad school was brutal. I studied mechanical engineering, and I was good at it, but it wasn't my dream. It was my parents'. I worked like a machine, barely slept, skipped meals, lived off caffeine and adrenaline. Claire glanced at him, reading the shadow in his expression. One night, during finals, I left campus after pulling almost 3 all-nighters in a row. I remember gripping the wheel, thinking I could make it home, and next thing I knew, I woke up in a hospital bed. Claire's breath caught. "Oh my gosh, Ravi," she said. He nodded, a wry smile tugging at his lips without reaching his eyes. Car was totaled, so was my illusion that grinding myself to dust was worth it. That wreck rearranged everything in an instant. I realized I was living someone else's dream, he said, gazing at the trail. So I stopped, walked away, figured out what my dreams really were. My parents, well, they still don't get it. They barely talk to me. I hope that changes one day, he admitted, voice low. I hope so too, she murmured. You're a good guy, Ravi. For what it's worth, I'm really glad you made it through that night, because otherwise, I never would have met you. Her lips curved in the faintest smile. Even if you do talk 90 miles an hour before 8 in the morning. It was Ravi's turn to chuckle. They walked in silence for a while. Then Claire found herself speaking. Hearing you say all that, it makes me wonder if I've ever stopped to figure out what I really want, what my dream even is. She let out a breath that felt heavier than the pack on her back. Most days, I guess I'm just checking boxes, doing what's planned, but I don't want to wake up one day and realize that I never really lived, she said. Ravi's steps slowed until they reached a small overlook bathed in honeyed light. Pines framed a sweeping view of river and rock, the wind threading cool fingers through Claire's hair. She took a deep breath, the ache in her chest loosening as he looked at her, not with the easy brightness he probably wore like armor, but with something deeper, something unguarded. No one ever plans the best moments, he said softly. They just happen. The air seemed to hum between them, golden and still. For one suspended breath, Claire thought he might reach for her hand, thought maybe she wanted him to. But then he turned back toward the trail, giving her space. Come on, he said gently. Still a ways to go. And Claire followed, her pulse thrumming like distant wings, carrying a truth she wasn't ready to name. Chapter 9. Claire spent the next few days in a low-level tug-of-war with her own brain. She threw herself into work and color-coded to-do lists, hoping the rhythm would scrub away the lingering echoes of Saturday, the golden light at the overlook, and Ravi's voice saying things no one had ever said to her before. It didn't work. Every quiet moment became a loop. The way his smile softened when he said she wasn't rigid, the warmth in his voice when he told her he admired her. Did he open up like that because he meant it? Or was it just to fill the silence? He's just nice, she told herself firmly. He's nice to everyone. Sunshine is his default setting, after all. By Tuesday night, she was so desperate for distraction that she volunteered to help chaperone Sophie's school field trip the next day, given Mary's ankle was still mending. Mark was swamped with work, and Claire figured wrangling second graders would be the perfect mental palate cleanser. What could go wrong? Plenty, as it turned out. The event was at a sprawling outdoor education fair, tents and booths scattered across a big grassy park, the air sharp with autumn and wood smoke from a fire-building demo. Claire had just handed out a round of snacks when Sophie squealed loud enough to startle a flock of birds. Ravi! Claire froze, heart stuttering like a faulty engine. She turned slowly, and there he was, kneeling by a rope station with his sleeves rolled up, sunlight catching in his dark hair. He looked good, too good for someone who supposedly lived in quick-dry shirts. Sophie launched herself at him, and he caught her easily, laughing as she chattered a mile a minute. "Hey, superstar. You want to learn how to tie some knots?" Claire hung back, willing her pulse to behave, as Ravi showed Sophie how to loop and twist the rope into something resembling a bowline. His hands moved with easy confidence, guiding hers, and Sophie's delighted giggles carried across the crisp air. Something about the scene, the warmth in his smile, the gentleness in his voice, lodged under Claire's skin like a splinter. "Want to try, Aunt Claire?" Sophie called, holding out the rope. Claire summoned a smile. "Maybe later," she said. No way was she standing that close to Ravi, not with her thoughts in chaos. They chatted briefly, Ravi asking if she was enjoying the day, and Claire mentioning something neutral and breezy, or so she hoped. Then another group of kids crowded the booth, and Ravi gave her that easy grin before turning back to help. Claire told herself it was fine, totally fine. This was just a coincidence, nothing to overthink. But that night, brushing her hair in the soft glow of her bathroom light, Claire realized that denial was no longer an option. She liked Ravi. Chapter 10. Claire had been dreading this day for weeks. When her boss announced the company's big team-building event at the High Timber Challenge Park, a ropes course not far out of Portland, Claire's stomach had dropped. Heights, harnesses, forced camaraderie. It sounded like her personal definition of corporate purgatory. But skipping wasn't an option, so here she was on a brisk Friday morning, tugging on a helmet and wondering if there was enough coffee in Oregon to get her through this. She was still adjusting her chin strap when a familiar laugh floated across the clearing. Claire's head snapped up, and there he was, Ravi, standing by a cluster of carabiners, smiling that same wide grin that Claire finally admitted made her heart flutter. For a second, Claire just stared, her brain buffering. Of course he worked here. The universe clearly had a sense of humor. She should have connected the dots at the community event, when he'd been manning the booth with the Timber Challenge signage. But she'd been too flustered to think beyond the knots he was patiently teaching Sophie. Ravi spotted her then, eyes crinkling as he strode over. "Okay, now I know you're stalking me, Captain Prepared," he teased. Claire let out a laugh that surprised her with how easy it felt. "Don't blame me, blame my boss. I was drafted for corporate bonding." "Corporate bonding, huh? Sounds intense." He grinned. "You ready for the high ropes?" he asked. "Define ready," she shot back, and he chuckled. Before she could think of something clever to add, a group of teens in bright jackets came bounding toward him. Ravi lifted a hand in greeting, then glanced back at her. "Catch you later, Claire." And just like that, he was gone again, his energy sweeping into the crowd like sunlight breaking through clouds. He wasn't leading her team, thank goodness, just the group ahead. Ravi moved among the teens easily, demonstrating gear checks, cracking jokes that turned nervous giggles into laughter. Watching him in his element was disarming. This was skill, patience, and a quiet strength that steadied even the shakiest kid as they stepped onto the high ropes. Claire's own guide, a laid-back man named Skylar, caught her staring. "You know Ravi?" he asked with a grin, snapping Claire back to reality. "I'm in a hiking group with him. I didn't realize he worked here too," she answered. Skylar nodded. "Usually handles the youth programs, at-risk kids, confidence-building stuff. He's one of the best we've got." The day both crawled along and flew by. Claire gripped ropes with sweaty palms, forcing herself across wobbly planks while her coworkers whooped encouragement. She survived, barely, and when it was over, she was equal parts exhausted and oddly exhilarated. As her group filtered toward the parking lot, Claire turned a corner and collided with Ravi, literally. His hand shot out, steadying her before she could stumble back. "Whoa, easy there," he said, laughter curling through his voice. His palm was warm against her hand, and for a moment, neither of them moved. "Guess I should watch where I'm going," Claire managed. "Or maybe I should," he said lightly, though his gaze lingered, something unspoken flickering there. He squeezed her hand gently before letting go, sending awareness skittering up her spine. "How'd it go today?" Ravi asked. "I didn't cry," she said, aiming for breezy. "So I'm calling it a win." His grin widened. "Knew you'd crush it, Captain Prepared." But before she could respond, someone called his name from across the clearing. Ravi gave her one last smile and jogged away. Chapter 11. The next Saturday, Claire arrived early to the hike, determined to keep things normal. She would be friendly and casual. Whatever had passed between her and Ravi at the ropes course was nothing. A blip. That's what she told herself anyway. But something fluttered low in her stomach the moment he flashed that easy grin when he noticed her hiking with ease and said, "Looks like you're practically a pro." "Don't sound so surprised," she replied, managing a smile that felt steadier than she expected. The trail was a blaze of color, their group winding single file along the ridge. Conversation flowed easily, with Ravi tossing jokes around and Claire volleying back with a confidence she didn't quite recognize as her own. Things felt different now, like they were speaking a language no one else on the trail could hear. Later, as the path widened, Claire drifted back to adjust her pack. When she glanced up, she noticed Rosa walking beside Ravi, laughter bubbling from her like a brook. Rosa reached out, touching his arm lightly, as she said something Claire couldn't catch. The sight hit her harder than she expected, jealousy blooming beneath her ribs. Rosa, gorgeous, funny, effortlessly warm Rosa, was putting the moves on Ravi. Claire thought back over the previous hikes. Images flooded her mind as she remembered how Rosa always laughed the loudest at Ravi's jokes, was always the first to agree to a post-hike hangout, always sliding into the spot beside him whenever the trails widened. It didn't take a matchmaker to read those signs. Claire's throat tightened as she walked on, the chatter around her blurring. Rosa wasn't just beautiful, she was kind, the sort of person no one could dislike, which made it worse. Claire couldn't even summon the energy to resent her. By the time they reached the trailhead, Claire had folded in on herself. Her earlier spark dimmed. Ravi clapped his hands. "Great hike, team. Who's up for a post-hike lunch?" Sounds great," Rosa replied. Jake groaned something about grading papers. Dan and Marissa begged off for a family obligation, which left... Claire forced a smile. "I can't today. Headache," she lied. Ravi's brow furrowed. "You doing okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just need some quiet," she said quickly. "Guess it's just you and me for lunch then," Rosa chimed in, her voice light and unassuming. Claire's chest squeezed as Ravi turned to answer Rosa with an easy smile. She murmured her goodbye and headed for her car, the gravel crunching underfoot like punctuation marks to a sentence she didn't want to finish. On the drive home, she told herself it was for the best. Ravi needed someone like Rosa, someone who could match his light without dimming it. Claire gripped the wheel tighter, her jaw set. She'd only end up disappointing him, the way she had her last boyfriend. Better to step aside now than break something later. Chapter 12. The following week dragged like wet boots on a steep trail. Claire buried herself in her work, staying late at the office and telling herself it was all necessary, even as a quiet voice whispered that maybe she just didn't want to face more thoughts about Ravi and Rosa sharing easy smiles. When Saturday rolled around, instead of going on her hike, Claire texted the group that she needed to catch up on rest after a crazy work week. Technically true, but the deeper truth sat heavy in her chest. She couldn't stomach seeing Rosa and Ravi now that her true feelings about him had burst forth and loudly made themselves known in her mind. That evening, as she curled on the couch in sweats, her phone buzzed with an incoming message, not on the hiking group thread, just from Ravi. A photo filled the screen. It was a breathtaking overlook, hills washed in patches of gold from changing leaves of deciduous trees tucked amongst the evergreens. Below it his text read, "Not the same without you, Captain Prepared." Claire stared at the words for a full 10 seconds before her fingers moved. "You survived without me? Miracles do happen." His reply came quick. "Barely. I had to carry my own water. Tragic." A laugh bubbled out of her. They volleyed back and forth for several minutes. Him teasing her about her strategic water pack, her warning him not to get lost without her laminated trail maps. Light, easy, dangerously comforting conversation. When the exchange wound down, Claire set her phone on the cushion beside her, but her gaze kept drifting back. The photo glowed softly on the screen, and something inside her twisted. She'd missed him today, missed his laugh, his energy, the way he somehow made even the hardest inclines feel lighter. And the realization hit with the force of a falling boulder. This man mattered more than she'd ever intended to let him. Claire pressed her palms to her eyes, groaning. She'd skipped the hike to protect herself, and all it had done was make her want the next one more. Even if Ravi never saw her as anything but a friend, even if Rosa was already halfway to winning his heart, Claire knew one thing with startling clarity. She wanted to be near him, and the thought terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. The following Saturday, Claire's alarm went off at 4:15 a.m., and for a fleeting second, she considered throwing the blanket back over her head. Then the truth settled like dawn across her chest. This was the last hike, the final Saturday. After today, the easy rhythm of Ravi's voice, the flash of his smile on the trail, it would all become a memory. And she wasn't ready for that. By the time she pulled into the Angel's Rest trailhead, the sky was just barely shifting from inky darkness to the pale blue-gray of morning. The group huddled in jackets, breath puffing white, as Ravi greeted each person, his energy warm enough to melt the chill. When his gaze landed on her, something flickered, soft and bright, and Claire's heart gave a foolish kick. The climb began under a bruised horizon, boots crunching over frost-slicked ground. Slowly, light seeped into the world, lavender and rose bleeding into gold. Claire kept towards the back of the pack, the cold biting her cheeks and her heart aching with something sharper than the wind. She wasn't ready to let this end. Instinctively, she slipped into planning mode, her go-to refuge when life tilted sideways, her mind already racing with lists and what-ifs, desperate for something to control. She told herself firmly that she'd sign up for another hiking series led by Ravi. That way she could keep seeing him long enough to sort through her feelings and get them out of her system. Finally, they crested the summit, just as the sun broke free, spilling fire over the gorge. The group fell silent, awed, faces turned toward the blaze of morning. After a long, reverent hush, Ravi turned to the group. "Thank you, all of you," he said, voice warm. "Couldn't have asked for a better group to finish out my time as a hiking guide." Claire blinked. "Finish out?" Ravi's smile curved, tinged with bittersweetness. "This is my last series. I'm stepping away from weekend hikes, but never fear, the guided hikes will continue. We've actually just offered the position to a really knowledgeable guide. Just waiting for her to confirm she'll take it." A ripple of surprise ran through the group. Jake spoke first. "Wait, quitting? Why, dude?" he asked. "Not quitting. I'm moving on to a new role. I've accepted the director position at the High Timber Challenge. It's a full-time gig and, well, I want my weekends back," Ravi said. Rosa let out a low whistle. "Director, huh? Look at you climbing the ladder," she said. "Literally," Ravi joked, and laughter rippled through the group. "But yeah, my bank account isn't complaining about the job change, that's for sure." Claire managed to smile, even as her stomach hollowed out like the canyon below. She listened to the chatter, the congratulations, but it all blurred into background noise. She wanted to tell him something, anything, but the words tangled in her throat, heavy as stones. When the group began its descent, Claire hung back, letting the laughter drift ahead. She told herself this was for the best. Ravi's world was big and bright, full of laughter and possibility, and hers was neat, orderly, and planned down to the minute. By the time they reached the parking lot, Claire had sealed the truth behind her smile. Ravi Shah would be a memory, nothing more. The thought pulsed like a bruise as another truth followed close behind. She wasn't bold or brave. She was just boring Claire, the woman who let life slip by because it felt safer than taking a risk. And the thought carved through her like the wind off the summit. Chapter 13. The next Saturday, Claire woke before her alarm, heart thrumming with a restless energy she couldn't name. The previous week's hike had left her hollowed out, carrying unsaid words like stones in her pack, things she'd never dare voice. "You're wonderful. You're kind. You're brilliant. Please stay in my life." She closed her eyes, trying to will herself back to sleep. When that didn't work, she began mentally reviewing her Saturday schedule, carefully laid out in her planner. Groceries by 9, laundry by 10, a thorough closet cleanout by noon. But halfway through the list, she stopped. What was she doing? Why did order always feel safer than possibility? Claire wasn't bold, not really, but maybe, just this once, she could choose not to be the woman who let life quietly slip past. She remembered a trail Ravi had mentioned weeks ago, a lesser-known viewpoint with a sunrise that could steal your breath. She found the name in her notes, of course she'd written it down, and without letting herself overthink, packed her gear and drove. The parking lot was almost empty when she pulled in, dawn still pressing its cool hands against the sky. Only one other car sat there, a dark SUV that looked suspiciously like Ravi's. Claire's pulse skipped. Coincidence. It had to be. That wasn't Ravi's car, it just looked like his. She shoved the thought aside, shouldered her pack, and started up the trail. The forest was hushed, dew reflecting sunshine like liquid gold on every fern, the air sharp with pine and promise. She let the rhythm of her boots soothe her nerves until the trees thinned and the world opened up, river glinting far below, sky streaked with wisping clouds. And there he was. Ravi sat on a flat rock near the edge, thermos in hand, silhouetted against the rising sun. When he turned at the sound of her steps, his smile broke like morning itself. "Claire," he said, warmth spilling into her name. "Guess great minds think alike." She laughed, breathless for reasons that had nothing to do with the climb. "Or maybe I'm stalking you, remember?" He patted the rock beside him. "If so, you're very good at it. Come on, sit down." She sank down, the view unfurling before them like a secret. For a while they just sat, letting silence do what words couldn't. Finally, Claire spoke. "You know, I think I've changed a bit these past 7 weeks." Her fingers worried the seam of her jacket. "I signed up to prove something to my sister, but somewhere along the way, I think I proved something to myself too." Ravi tilted his head, curiosity soft in his eyes. "And what's that?" "That I'm capable of more than spreadsheets and project management." She smiled, small and wry. "Though don't get me wrong, I still love a good planner." His laugh wrapped around her like sunlight. "For the record, I've always liked that about you." "Always?" Ravi's gaze held hers, steady and bright. "Claire, I liked you the first moment you marched up to the trailhead, looking like you were about to conquer Everest." She let out a shaky laugh. "If you liked me so much, why do you spend half the time teasing me?" she asked. "Bad habit," he said, sheepish grin tugging at his mouth. "Turns out when I have a crush, I revert to middle school tactics. Very mature, I know." "You had a crush?" she said. "Have," he corrected gently. Present tense. He took a deep breath. His voice dropped, earnest now. "You're smart, Claire. Focused. And I know that you really care about people. That much is clear in all the ways you've been showing up for your niece. And you don't quit when things get hard. Honestly, you blow me away." His voice softened further, eyes locked on hers. "You're beautiful, even on that second hike covered in mud. And I was really bummed this week at the possibility of you not being in my life anymore." Her throat tightened. A dozen thoughts crowded in. She drew in a shaky breath, eyes fixed on his. "I wasn't expecting to hear that," she admitted softly, "but I'm glad you said it." She paused, then her voice firmed, like she was anchoring herself to the truth. "Because I care for you too, more than I should probably admit on a cliff at sunrise," she added with a grin. Relief and joy broke across Ravi's face like light on water. "Thank God for that," he murmured, then laughed at himself. "Sorry, that probably was the least romantic response ever." "Actually," she answered, smiling so wide it hurt. "It's perfect." He reached for her hand, their fingers tangling like roots finding home. For a moment, they just sat there, heart steadying in the hush of wind and pine. Then, slowly, Ravi leaned in. The world seemed to still, the hush of the trees, the faint rush of the river below, her own breath snagging in her throat. When his lips met hers, it wasn't tentative, it was warm and sure, a kiss that spoke of all the words they hadn't dared to say. He tasted of coffee and something sweeter, something that felt like hope. Claire's fingers curled into his jacket, holding on like she'd finally found solid ground. When they parted at last, breathless and smiling, She laughed against his cheek. "What?" he asked, grinning. "Just, maybe abandoning my planner every once in a while isn't the worst idea I've ever had." And in the glow of a new day, with the gorge sprawled in wild splendor below, Claire finally believed it. Epilogue. 8 months later, Claire sat in a corner booth of her favorite cafe, the scent of cinnamon and fresh coffee curling through the air. Mary was across from her sipping a latte while Sophie chattered about a goat she saw when her parents took her on a trip to Savi's Island. The conversation was lively, chaotic, and wonderfully comforting. "So," Mary said, arching a brow as Sophie darted off to grab another napkin, "what's your big plan for the weekend, Miss Organized?" Claire grinned and slid her leather planner across the table. Mary flipped it open, scanning the neat color-coded blocks before bursting out laughing. "Oh my gosh, you actually wrote down spontaneous Saturday? Claire, that is not how spontaneity works." "Hey," Claire said, laughing too. "Baby steps. I'm easing into it. Living on the edge is hard, remember?" Mary shook her head, smiling. "I'll give you points for effort," she said with a wink. "It's working for me," Claire said lightly, tucking the planner back into her bag. Turns out, a little chaos isn't fatal after all. A few moments later, she hugged Mary and Sophie goodbye, promising Sophie that yes, she'd bring Ravi over to dinner soon. Then she stepped outside into the warm sun, a smile breaking across her face as a familiar SUV pulled to the curb. Ravi leaned out the window, grinning that grin that made her heart flutter every time. "Ready for a spontaneous Saturday, Captain Prepared?" She slid into the passenger seat, buckling her belt with a smirk. "Ready as I'll ever be. What's on the agenda?" "Just trust me," he said, eyes dancing. The trail wound through mossy woods to a hidden waterfall, water spilling in silver ribbons into a crystal pool. Sunlight slanted through evergreens, painting the scene like a secret paradise. Claire stood in awe. "It's beautiful," she whispered, sitting down on a broad, flat rock to take in the view. "Been wanting to take you here for a long time," Ravi said with a smile. "Just had to wait for it to be warm enough." Ravi settled beside her. For a long moment, they simply listened to the hush of water and wind. Then he spoke. "I told my parents about you last week." Claire's head snapped toward him. "You did?" He nodded, a hopeful smile curving his lips. "First real conversation we've had in months. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like a start. Like maybe they're finally beginning to see that I'm happy. And you're a big part of that," he said. Something swelled in her chest, warm and overwhelming. She reached for his hand without thinking, their fingers tangling easily. They sat like that for a while, talking about everything and nothing. The hikes they'd loved, the places they still wanted to see, the quiet little hopes neither had said aloud before. When the breeze turned sharp, Ravi slid an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. She went willingly, tucking herself against his side, as if she belonged there all along. "Claire," he murmured after a beat, tilting her chin so she met his gaze. His smile was tender, almost shy. "I love you." The words sank deep, and for once, Claire didn't hesitate. Her throat felt tight, but her voice was steady. "I love you too, Ravi." Relief broke across his face like sunlight, and he kissed her, slow, certain, the kind of kiss that made promises without a single word. As the waterfall roared and the evergreens whispered overhead, Claire closed her eyes and held on, knowing with absolute clarity that some of life's best chapters weren't planned at all. Thank you so much for listening to today's story, The Scenic Route. This was actually the first story I wrote that wasn't Christmas themed. Spoiler alert, we have several Christmas stories coming up for December, and I have to say I had a lot of fun writing Claire. I thought a lot about something I had heard once about Jane Austen when she was writing Emma, and she wanted to challenge herself to write a character she thought nobody would like. I thought it would be a fun idea to write a character who wasn't, happy-go-lucky or super-duper likable or the belle of the ball. I mentioned in my author's note in the description for this video that I actually relate a lot to Claire. I have felt many times kind of like a fish out of water when interacting with folks, and I definitely do like some organization, but nowhere near Claire's level. So I thought it would be fun to explore what a romance could look like for someone like Claire who isn't immediately likable. Although Ravi is, of course, the type of guy who would immediately like nearly everyone he meets. So her kind of rigid, straightforward attitude is definitely not one that would have put him off. I imagine that Ravi, being someone who was studying to be an engineer, probably encountered lots of people who were rigid like Claire, and maybe he even was himself kind of, serious and by the book and had to be super organized before his accident. So I imagine that he has an easy time kind of seeing past the walls she puts up, and I think he has a sense that there's oftentimes a lot more to people than meets the eye, and a lot more to someone who maybe seems a bit socially awkward. And I really do think that Ravi is the type of person who would have spent the time to try and get to know her and bring her out of her shell. Maybe someone did that for him back in the day. Anyways, I really came to love the both of these characters, and I really hope you enjoyed them too. If you enjoyed this story, I'd super appreciate it if you could give this video a like, as that helps me out in the algorithm. And if you'd like to hear more cozy, wholesome romances, please consider subscribing. I'd love to share more stories with you. Thanks again for listening. I hope you have a great day. Stay cozy, friends.